North Carolina. And what do I do if someone is able to convince my child if I am trustworthy? So someone is, wow. Okay. Hey, Joseph, can you hear me?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. You're on air with Noelle, Clare, Mandisa,
Okay.
Kendall, and Marissa. You got a gaggle over here.
I
So,
want to start out by saying thank you. I don't know if you would be, Claire was the only person that I talked to last time, and I was a little under the weather.
okay. Yeah, I remember that.
But I wanted to just say thank you to Dale real quick,
Right.
just because of how helpful he was communicating with me afterwards.
Yeah.
But I wanted to preface this question saying that as of right now, my child is still very young. And since the last time we talked, I was thinking a lot about what is it that I'm actually worried about when it comes to growing up or raising my child in a conservative religious community. And I think that my biggest fear along those lines, it's not my biggest fear by far, is what do I do if someone is able to convince my child that I'm not trustworthy or that I'm not moral. And I want to preface that saying that I'm not doing anything that would make my child think that, but I do know that being an atheist people tend to assume things about my trustworthiness and my morality and things like that. And if someone, whether it be a family member, whether it be someone that she just trusts in general, I guess it's kind of a two-part question. One is do you guys think that I'm being paranoid when I suggest that I'm worried that someone could sorry, I'm losing my words. Am I being paranoid if I'm worried that someone could convince my child that I am somebody that they shouldn't trust?
Right.
And two is, if someone is listening that's in that situation, or if I ever find myself in that situation, do you have any recommendations? The issue being that if your child doesn't trust you, it's kind of hard to tell them. Your credibility is poisoned at that point, so it's hard to convince them otherwise.
Okay, I'm going to channel Dale here for a little bit. I think he would say a couple of things. First of all, as a parent, Dale is a big believer in teaching your child to question everyone, even your own parent. So it can start with something silly, like they ask, how far is the moon? And you can say 4 feet. And they look at you like, come on. And then, so you begin with just like joshing sorts of things to get them to realize that you're fallible and you make mistakes too. The other thing is, from a developmental point of view, until your kid hits about 11 or 12-ish, they are going to hold you above all else. They're not going to question you. And I can tell from a personal experience, both of my parents were not the best parents, and anyone who told me anything that was disparaging about them, I didn't believe them. I believed that my parents were good people. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I went, oh, yeah. So you have that on your side.
Okay.
And as far as people who are trying to undermine what you're doing as a parent, gone. That to me is a deal breaker. I don't care if it's my mother, my aunt, my best friend, gone. That, for me. You can't have, if you can't trust someone with your child, then for me, they couldn't be in my life. My child is much too important. And there are a lot of folks who will do a lot of things that are not good for their kids, and I don't understand it. Being around someone who is not good for the child because you want to be around that person, I don't get that. So, all right, who's next?
I would like to say that no, I do not think that you're paranoid. I think it's normal as parents to worry about every little thing, but we also, so that we don't go insane, we have to step back and compartmentalize all of those worries and kind of realize, if I play the what if game all day, every day, I'm going to drive myself nuts. So I don't think you're paranoid. I think you're a good parent for being worried about things.
I'd also add that you got to trust your kids a little more, don't think of them as so easily corruptible, because my kid is, especially my oldest, is 11, and he already has the mind of a skeptic. So anybody who's disparaging something or someone he cares about, he's automatically skeptical of them, not just taking in everything anyone says unquestioningly. So if you've instilled those values of think of what people are saying and question it if it sounds weird, which I assume you are, I think giving them the benefit of the doubt and credit that they would be able to spot that kind of behavior coming from someone else, I think that'll help too.
Yeah, and I will also channel Dale. Like I swear there's not been a single show I've done that I didn't say the same quote, is teach them how to think, not what to think. And so if you give them the tools of how to be skeptical, then you don't have to worry about them, because they'll come to the right conclusions on their own.
Yeah. Mandisa?
I don't think I can add much more than what has already been said by you, Claire, and you, Marissa. But I would also encourage, like it is something that you worry about, especially with our position as atheists and non-believers. But always keeping an open line of communication with your child or children does help. And, imparting the do as I say, not as I do method really does work. Continuing to talk to them and being honest with them, and it really does help a lot. It helps with your child being able to trust you with any information, and to also admit, be able to admit when you don't know something or you might need to do some research on it. That way that they're not just trusting that adult or whoever it might try to say something about you as the parent.
Right on.
And yes, trusting your child is important too.
Yeah, Dale has suggested, Mandisa, I know you've heard this, Dale has suggested in the past that you go say, well, I don't know, and go with them to look up the answer and find it together. And also, I think you've talked about this before, Mandisa, but that how you can prepare, you can front load for the people you're most concerned with. You can talk to them ahead of time and say, listen, I know you're religious, but this is what you can't talk about, what you can. Am I right? Did you talk about that? Or am I?
May or may not have said that,
okay.
But it's good advice, though.
Right. Okay. Joseph, were you trying to say something?
Oh, no, you're okay. I lost my thought.
Joseph, how old is your child?
She's 4, and she has autism, which makes the communication barrier a real challenge.
Yes.
And I'm hoping to work with that over the upcoming years. Okay. And I just, I know that last time when I brought that up, I know that that's a little bit outside of the it might be outside of the expertise that you guys have. And so I don't necessarily want to approach it from the perspective of a child on the spectrum.
Right.
Marissa actually
makes a lot of sense.
Marissa actually can speak to that, I think. If you have a question about that, she does have some experience in this.
Well, it's, when the communication barrier is so strong, it does make it very challenging to establish good communication. But it's not impossible, and I've learned a lot about that over the past year. My daughter was first diagnosed last year, so this is all. I'm a relatively new parent, and I'm even more new to all of this. And so establishing that communication has been a real challenge, but it's something that we're working very hard on. I guess I just I don't know why I worry about someone. Or why I worry so much about someone trying to poison her against me, so to speak. But it's don't want somebody to convince her, for example, that the reason she has autism is because I didn't believe in God and God was
Lordy.
punishing me by getting to her, or
Right.
all of these awful sentiments that I hear stories about.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to find good ways to get out in front of any of these challenges.
Right. I'd like to know what Marissa has to say about this, because when I'll just say that when it was my turn, I was going to say that when our children will trust who they have the most exposure to, especially when they're young. So if you are one of the people that your child is around the most, then your child, up until the point, like Claire said, when they're 11 or 12, will trust you. They'll know that they can trust you by that point. So if someone random comes in and tries to say this or that, your child is not going to believe them because they know you. And if you live by example, I think that's what Mandisa was talking about, was do as I say, not as I do, which is the opposite of what you're leading by example, But
it's not how I was raised. I was kind of raised the opposite way, and it's always something that I promised myself I would do differently.
Yeah.
Right.
When I know that you guys have talked a lot about spanking in the past, for example, and my father not so much, but my mother was one of those. When I say jump, ask how high on the way up.
Yeah.
Type mentalities. And I love my mom. I don't want to disparage your mom. If you happen to ever listen to this, please know that I love you. But she would, when I was younger, it was hard for me to trust her at times, because sometimes I felt like I was being spanked because she was angry, not because I had done something wrong.
Right.
That's a pretty awful feeling.
Right. Well, Marissa, can you speak to, challenges that in the situation that he's talking about, when, are there issues with when the communication has a barrier like that, or, what are the additional factors that Joseph should be aware of?
Well, Joseph, I am an autistic person, so keep that in mind when I say this. Try not to think of it as a barrier, because that implies something that's broken or something that's an obstacle. So,
no, I agree with that 100%.
So I'm a person who
and
does
real quick,
have
just to be fair, I'm pretty sure that I'm an autistic person too. I'm just now kind of realizing this, and I could be wrong. I'm trying to figure it out. I just wanted to put that out there real quick.
Sure. So if you think of it more like a maze, you're not always going to know immediately the way to get through a maze. But just because you make an error or assume something is the wrong way and it isn't, it doesn't mean you're not going to get through the maze, and it doesn't mean you were wrong for trying something. With a child who is 4, you're going to have a little bit more difficulty, not because the child is broken or because they don't understand, but because they haven't developed the ability to describe the way they think quite as much as an adult can perceive it or work within it. But once you establish that, and once you know the way through that maze, so to speak, the fact that you can do it will automatically put you above anyone else who tries to communicate that. Just Kendall here can tell you, having spent some time with me as an autistic partner, like it's not an impediment. It's not difficult. It's just sometimes you just have to figure out the way to navigate it a little bit.
Totally.
But once you have it, it's practically effortless.
Yeah, and if you don't, I hope I don't come across as speaking over you, but as your partner, I think what really makes our relationship work, and maybe the same with your other relationships, is we have very open dialogue about different things that are different about us. So I'm not a person with autism, but I do have anxiety. And so, we're driving up to Pike Place yesterday, and Marissa tells me, hey, if I grab your arm like this, like, it's because I'm super overwhelmed and I need you to, like, rub my back and tell me it's okay and get me away from people. And, same thing. I said, okay, well, if I snap at you, I'm sorry. It's probably because I'm sensory overloaded with all of the people as well. And don't take it personally. And so it's when, maybe when your daughter is exhibiting different behaviors, you can ask her, like, hey, how are you feeling when you do this? Or, I mean, I know I have a 3-year-old son, so I know there's only so much that they can communicate at that age anyways.
What do you need?
Yeah. And what do you need is super important too.
Yeah, I've never been able to get an answer yet to how are you feeling. We're working on getting her to even express when something hurts, where it hurts, and trying to find getting her to communicate with us in that level. And it's luckily the local school system has been really helpful in terms of helping us to get her resources and early intervention education and things like that, which I've noticed a lot since we figured it out and have gotten her into programs that she's really made some awesome strides. And I just, it's getting to a place where I can get her to tell me how she's feeling and what she thinks. I mean, she's honestly never even asked me a question. And I agree 100% that I don't see it as a disability or something that's wrong with her. In fact, one of the main reasons that I want to find out whether or not I'm on the spectrum is not so that it's not for me. It's so that I can, so that I can essentially the same. I came out as an atheist publicly because I wanted to help normalize the idea of atheism by showing people that there's good people out there that are atheists. And there's part of me that really wants to come out as someone on the spectrum because I want to help be that example of somebody that, was able to have relationships and have a family and show that it's not that there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with my daughter. It's just that they approach the way that they think, the way that they view the world around them a little bit differently. And I am trying to work on how to establish that communication with her. And actually, there was something that I believe it was Mandisa said that really makes me feel a lot better, and that is that, as long as I'm continue to work hard and establish that line of communication, if I'm the one that establishes it, then I will be able to have that connection with her in a much more significant way than someone else. To be honest, my biggest fear would be somebody that would be related and close, like my mother-in-law, who she absolutely adores. She loves rocking in the rocking chair with my mother-in-law and singing songs with her, and it's actually really sweet to watch, and I love their relationship. But I also know that she's not the biggest fan of me because of her conservative and religious background. And it would be people like that she also trusts that would be my biggest fear, is someone that would try to, and I don't think that my mother-in-law would do something like that, at least not at this point. And if I ever get a hint that she is, like you said, as far as I'm concerned, I don't want her to be around her anymore, but I'm hoping it would never come to that. She's honestly a very sweet lady until she's not.
I can definitely relate to that. My mother,
So can I.
my mother's very conservative. I wouldn't say very religious, but maybe like a religion supremacist. You know what I mean? Thinks that she's better than everybody else just for having a belief in God. And my 3-year-old is with her right now. And he also absolutely adores her. They are best friends. And she's a really good grandma, but she definitely undermines me at times. And, the way I plan to combat that when he gets older and starts asking me questions like, oh, well, grandma says this. I think a good way to approach it would be, oh, well, what do you think? What do you think about that? And, not really sway him either way. And if he asks for my opinion, I'll give it and leave it at that. Because, the more afraid we are of that interaction happening, and the more we push back, the more our children are going to go, wait a minute, why are you having such a visceral reaction to this? So I think it's kind of cool to just, sit back and ask questions and have him turn out however he's going to turn out. Well, I give him the tools of how I think he should think.
Yeah. And also, my kid's other parent probably thinks Fox News is too liberal.
Wow.
And there's me,
Yes,
who
actually.
is atheist, polyamorous, transgender. It's like I'm working against a pretty difficult system. But, you said something that stood out to me, and that is that she doesn't ask questions. And I tend to frustrate people for the same reason, because that's not how I learn, and they take that as a sign of disinterest. But once she's able to communicate with you how she does learn about people and the way it works, you have a brand new way to relate and figure out how they process information. And you've just got to trust her, It's...
I do. I don't want to. I know it might sound like I don't. I'm honestly, in terms of my actual real fears that I have and things that cause me real anxiety. This is much lower on the list, in the sense that it's just higher on the list when you put it in the category of concerns of raising a child in a conservative community. I guess that's when it starts showing up high on the list, as opposed to encompassing, well, okay, what are you really afraid of in general? To be honest, the more I reach out to the community around me, the less afraid of it I become. Because I'm relatively new. I moved here coming on 2 or 3 years ago now. And it's been kind of relieving to learn the community and it not, and instead of reinforcing my fear, it's actually quelling them a little bit. So that's actually been really helpful to learn that my community isn't as backwards as I had feared, I guess.
Right. You said you have really good resource people to help you with your daughter. I wonder if you can't talk to them about the concerns you have about your mother-in-law, and then they can say, for instance, I think given the development your child is undergoing and the stage she's at and so forth, that it's best that you don't talk to her about X, Y, and Z. And that way you can approach your mother-in-law and have it be the expert who's saying these things rather than you.
Well, the only issue I have with that is I'm nervous to come out as, I have come out as an atheist publicly to friends and family. I have not done that in the workplace or in any of the relationships that I have with the people that are, like I have a local autism group that I meet with on a monthly basis, or we don't make it every month, but we try to.
Right. The atheism doesn't have to be a part of it. It's because religion, there are lots of pretty and nice and sweet things about it. For instance, they might say, this is what I imagine they'll say, that any story that could be interpreted as being violent or scary cannot be told to her, like Noah's Ark. It's supposed to be a sweet story. Are you kidding me? Everything dies. But sweet stories about Jesus loving you and that sort of thing, it's innocuous at that age. And she comes home and asks you about it, and you can say, I don't know, what do you think? Like Kendall said. But there are certain things that should be off the table for her to talk to your daughter about. And if you say it's the expert rather than you, it takes it off you. And it doesn't have to even have anything to do with being an atheist.
Well, I guess my concern is if I was to go to this person that, and say that I'm worried that, there could be that a wedge like that could be created, that I think their first question would be why? And what reason would your daughter have to not trust you?
Oh, I don't think you have to go at it from that angle. You can say, my daughter hangs out with my mother-in-law quite a bit. And my mother-in-law is a very deeply religious person, and I think her intentions are good. But I'm a little concerned about my daughter's developmental ability to handle some of the harder stories in the Bible. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, or you could just say, and we have very different values, if you don't want to out yourself as an atheist.
Yeah, I'm okay with Christianity, and I'm okay with my mother-in-law talking about her Christianity and religion and God and all that stuff. I'm just a little afraid of some of the stories in the Bible or something like this. You don't have to out yourself. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah, and also depending on what your situation is with your spouse or the other parent of your child, if this is your mother-in-law and that's their parent, then you can talk to them and try to get that person on the same page as to how you're going to deal with your mother-in-law. So it's not just to you who is setting these boundaries, but it's also that co-parent or that spouse.
Yeah, and we have, me and my wife have had some conversations about it. I don't know if we've actually formally sat down with my mother-in-law and said, please don't talk about this stuff, let us do that.
Or talk about what she can talk about. Tell all the lovely stories about Jesus, and you can talk about your religion, but hell is off the table. And scary things like...
I think that I do think that she is aware that it would make me uncomfortable for her to talk about Noah's Ark or hell or sin with my daughter. But I haven't actually said that specifically, and maybe I should.
So you have an ally there. That's wonderful. A lot of people who call don't have that allyship in their partner.
Yeah.
Well, I think that she kind of ends up being stuck in the middle a little bit.
Right.
In the sense that, her mother is the person she's closest to, other than me. She values her mom's opinion, and she feels like she gets stuck in the middle. She's not an atheist, but she's not a religious person either. She is my ally in the sense that she understands where I'm coming from, and she'll support me when it's reasonable. And so I am grateful for that, and I'm very fortunate to have her. But I try not to put her in the middle.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to stress the relationship that they have. Or I don't want to put unnecessary stress on the relationship that they have.
I wouldn't think of it as being put in the middle so much as just doing her job of taking the best care of her daughter. And I was so stuck in that place. And then a friend said to me, Claire, your family, your husband and children, that is your focus. That is the most important thing right now. Your parents should be secondary to that. And she was right. If it's especially hard, I'm sure, since you like your mother-in-law. My mother was not an easy person to be with. And in fact, at this point, I'm completely estranged from her. But
I'm sorry.
Well, it's a good thing. Oh, it's a good thing to be estranged from her. It was bad in terms of being raised by her, but right now it's good. But as a parent, learning to value your family more than your parents is one of those growing up steps. And I know Kendall has had to deal with this quite a bit, and I've dealt with this quite a bit. I don't know about, and Mandisa, you've dealt with this a lot.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to say, my husband, my mother-in-law is quite religious, and so I kind of feel like I can speak to that whole situation. And my husband is not an atheist. He was raised Catholic. I'm not really sure what he is because he doesn't really like to talk about religion, which is ironic because I love to talk about religion and I'm not religious. But
that's how we are as well.
Yeah.
She doesn't let me talk about it.
Yeah. So I know that we've had our challenges when it comes to finding a balance between, what he was raised with and the traditions that he sometimes values. And he doesn't really go to church. So it's kind of this situation where I'm the super active one as an atheist, and he's kind of, I call him an apacatholic. He's like an apathetic Catholic. And so when before my daughter was born, we had talked about he wanted to baptize her. And I thought about it, and I was like, well, it's just it's harmless, it's a little water. But what I didn't want is to be promising that we were going to raise her in some specific religion. So the compromise that we came to was that, okay, we can baptize her, but I don't want her going to church before she can really understand what's happening. I don't want to say that we're going to raise her in anything specific. And so that was fine with my husband, and we knew that there would be some relatives that would be happy about the baptism, but we had so much trouble. I had so much trouble when I was trying to find a place to baptize her because we didn't go to church, and we didn't want to promise that we would raise her in whatever that was, so nobody wanted to baptize her. So at some point, I was so frustrated, and I finally realized, if this is that important to him, then he can do it. And so I said, if you want to do this, you go ahead and do this. And he never ended up doing it. But it's just kind of an example of a situation where we had to find that balance. And we've taken our daughter to a Unitarian church where they, have influences from lots of different religions, and I've tried to teach her that there are many religions out there. There are books that you can read if your daughter likes books. And, I think it's just a matter of you and your wife having a conversation and kind of saying, this is what we want to do. And then once you're on the same page, letting your mother-in-law know what her boundaries are. And then, as we're talking about this estranged parent or whatever, then whose job is it to communicate the boundaries to your mother-in-law, probably both of yours together? And then what are you going to do if she steps over those boundaries?
Thanks.
That was a long.
But it really summarized everything beautifully.
No, yeah, that was a great way to summarize it, to be honest.
Right on. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, but before I go, would you guys be okay if I spoke about something that you guys had talked to in a previous episode? But I know I've talked for a while, so if you just want to let me go, you can.
I'm happy to hear. We're all happy to hear it.
I remember, I forget which episode it was, somebody had mentioned, the idea of people that'll often say, when you spank your children, it's okay if you don't spank them in anger and that it works better. And I just wanted to relay, my parents were both of those mentalities. One would get angry and spank us, and the other my father made sure that he was never angry, and he sat us down, and he would tell us exactly what we had done wrong. He was very clear and made sure that we understood it, and then he would spank us. And I wanted to just say real quick that to anyone that thinks that that's a good way to go about it, the reason that I decided that I wasn't going to do it that way long before I even knew about the research on it was that what stuck with me was the conversation he had with me before he spanked me, and that the spanking didn't actually accomplish anything in this scenario. It didn't drive the point home. I don't even remember the spanking as well as I remember the conversations that he would sit down and have with me before he spanked me. And that, it seems like it makes sense, but it honestly, it just isn't necessary. And I don't know why anyone would want to hit their kids if it's not necessary, is all I really wanted to say.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Just
Thank you,
beautiful.
Joseph.
We can all agree with that.
Yes, I think so.
For sure. Oh, my gosh.
But I really appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to me today.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank
We
you for
appreciate
calling
your
in.
call.
Yeah.
And call
thank
back
you.
and let
That was
us
a great
know
call.
how
Yes.
things are going.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Yep, take care.
Take care, Joseph.
Take care.